Hey folks, before we jump into this week's session, wanted to point out that I do this weekly, talk about Microsoft Cloud news and updates, everything regarding Azure, Office 365, Microsoft 365, Teams, and more. So if you like what you see, please subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and share on your favorite social media platform. Without further ado, let's jump into this week's session. Hey folks, welcome to this edition of the Microsoft Cloud News Update, researching the cloud blogs so you don't have to. I'm Carl Kishel. This week we have a lot to discuss. We're going to talk about Azure Compliancy Review and some new tools to help maintain compliancy. We're going to do a Azure tour with Mark Russinovich and also talk about some roadmap updates regarding Teams and a couple other things regarding OneDrive and best practices for migration. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Strengthening and optimizing your compliancy in Azure Security Center. So this is a new feature built into Azure Security Benchmark. If you are using Azure Security Center today, you might be familiar with the compliancy dashboard and the security benchmark. If not, definitely check out these links for more info. But in essence, what the Compliancy Center now does is review your infrastructure to see if it complies with various regulations and regulatory standards. So these include ISO, NIST, PCI, etc. So what will happen if you run the Compliancy Manager against your infrastructure and system? You will get some feedback in terms of whether or not you are falling within the regulatory standards that are dictated by those particular standards by using the tool. There's some reporting available here, the ability to export your reports and provide some feedback in terms of what needs to be done to come up to compliancy regarding those particular standards. So definitely check out the link for more info on this new feature within the Azure Security Center. Inside the data center architecture of Azure, and having Mark Russinovich give you this walkthrough of all the different components that are available and that make up the typical Azure data center, the architecture, and some design principles. So Mark actually did this presentation at Microsoft Ignite a couple of weeks ago, and he recently reblogged about this particular session. And it's really interesting reading if you want to learn more about all the different components and behind the scenes, what goes on in a typical Azure data center. It's about an hour and a half long, a lot of details there, but I did want to call out one specific piece of detail, which is really, really fascinating. And this is around Project Palix. So Project Palix, you'll see it's kind of embedded when Mark talks about storage. And what Project Palix is the a proof of concept or the theory of using DNA molecules to store data. And really, really fascinating discussion from Mark and what Microsoft is doing in this area. One of the interesting things about DNA molecules is that they're so robust, they could withstand millions of years of time in terms of the longevity of DNA molecules, but also the density too. I think right now what Mark had mentioned was DNA molecules having the propensity to do 16 times more or be 16 times more dense than current technology availables around storage. So really, really cool things and something definitely to check out for more info. We have a roadmap update to share with you regarding Microsoft 365 and specifically Microsoft Teams. And this is a new update that's currently in development and is slated for an April 2021 release. So really just right around the corner. And this is regarding breakout rooms. Breakout rooms have been around for a while, but the ability to enter and leave breakout rooms really requires some kind of intervention from the meeting manager. What this particular feature will allow the meeting manager to do is create a timer for the breakout room. So set a start time, end time to allow predefined participants to go into the breakout room at a set time and then come back to the main room at a set time. So really cool feature and functionality. This feature will also cover some room retention capabilities as well as participant reassignment. So definitely be on the lookout for this feature coming soon to Microsoft Teams. Live transcription with speaker attribution is now available in Teams. It's gone GA, and this is specifically right now for the English language. So this was in preview for a while. It is now generally available. And what live transcription is, you're probably familiar with this capability to do transcription of a meeting. With a speaker attribution, you now have the particular speakers, whoever is speaking at that time, be assigned to that area or that aspect of the transcription. So really neat feature right now in English, coming soon for other languages. And that should be available in your tenant as we speak. Getting started with the Graph Explorer. If you're not familiar with the Microsoft Graph Explorer, it's basically a tool that exposes the APIs within the Microsoft Cloud Framework to give you a Graph Explorer or UI type of connectivity into the APIs within the Microsoft 365 family of cloud services. So this covers authentication, it covers other areas around security, Teams, Exchange, etc. So really need to learn a little bit more about the Microsoft Graph through this mechanism. And really, if you are interested in creating applications that sit on top of the Microsoft Cloud Platform, this is something to become familiar with, at least as a first blush, to use the Graph Explorer and some of the low-code capabilities of the Graph Explorer to connect into the APIs and be able to do code snippets and responses against the cloud APIs. So check out this link for an introduction to the Microsoft Graph Explorer. And last but not least, some best practices for migrating to SharePoint Online and OneDrive. So the first couple of sentences or paragraphs of this blog post get into some of the background around why you should use SharePoint, OneDrive, etc. It's all part of the Microsoft 365, Office 365 family. There are some tips and some processes and suggested framework to perform this particular migration. It's a lot of good background, or a lot of it is fairly straightforward, and if not, just common sense. But as you scroll through the blog post in the migration section, I thought was particularly helpful. And it goes over all the different capabilities and ways to do this particular migration. So it talks about manual upload as one particular way to do migrations. Another is using the OneDrive Sync app, so they're fairly straightforward. But we may not be aware of some of the migration tools that are available to do SharePoint migration, such as the SPMT, the SharePoint migration tool. That is a capability that's built on PowerShell that gives you migration facilities to migrate to SharePoint. The SharePoint assessment tool is a really nice tool to assess your SharePoint server and kind of determine whether or not the content is ready for SharePoint Online. And then last but not least, Migration Manager, which is available in the SharePoint Admin Center as a way of connecting servers, creating tasks, and distributing your migration workloads across your on-premises systems and into the cloud. So some pretty neat overview ideas and approaches here to go over before you start going into your migration strategy for Office 365. That concludes this edition of the Microsoft Cloud News Update. Get a chance, please subscribe to the channel. Again, we do this about every week. I also throw in some tips every now and then and some other goodies on the channel. Please share either via Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, etc. And of course, if you enjoyed the content here. If you have any feedback, I could be reached at Twitter at Carl Kischel. So I'm on Twitter and also LinkedIn. I could be found on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us this week. I hope you found this information useful. All of the items we covered are in the description of the video, so you can have quick links to all the resources that I've presented here on this session. So with that, I wish you well, and we will see you next time. Take care.